Here I go. Good morning. This is Sandy Rice with Common Sense Matters, a monthly radio program sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party to present a view of Tennessee different from that of our GOP supermajority. Yes, there are Democrats in Franklin County, Virginia, and we meet the fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. in the Franklin County Annex Building. That's at 839 Dinah Shore Boulevard in Winchester. We're in the small conference room, and we have signs to direct you. If you would like to be added to our mailing list, please contact Franklin County TN Democrats at gmail.com, and also check our Facebook page, which is Franklin County, Tennessee. There's a Franklin County in every state, so you want to be sure and put Tennessee in your searches. On May 11th, we'll be at the Big Community Fun Day at the Red Roof Pavilion at Winchester City Park. This is a big affair. It looks like a lot of fun. There'll be a cornhole tournament, barbecue, the Utopia Band. It runs from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., so look for us walking around there. I will be at the Franklin County High School Scholarship Awards ceremony on May 14th, presenting a $1,000 check to our essay winner, Cameron Ragland. Our next Common Sense Matters radio show will be May 24th. Helen Stapleton will be here with candidate for Tennessee State House Representative, District 39, Rosemary Drake. We've had a guest change. State Representative and U.S. Senate candidate Gloria Johnson is rescheduled for a later date. But today we have Representative Afton Bean, B-E-H-N, from District 51, East Nashville, and she is no slouch. Afton has been, she was elected in 2023 to complete the term of Bill Beck, so she is running for re-election for a full term this year. But Afton has been fighting for fairness and justice and right for all Tennesseans since 2017, before holding office. She is the co-sponsor of legislation to repeal the Tennessee grocery tax. What? High food prices include an added tax in Tennessee? Welcome, Afton. Thank you for coming. I call you Afton because I've known you for so long. Representative Bean. I just learned that's how you pronounce your last name, too, after 7 years. Take it away.
It's actually Bain. But...
Bain? Okay, Afton is hard enough for me to learn.
Yes.
Whoever you are, take it away.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. Sandy has been doing the Lord's work out in rural Tennessee and raising awareness about issues and why you should care about politics. So I'm excited to be on the show today.
Thank you. So, thanks for making it through the legislative session. Is there anything you want to get off your chest before you talk about the grocery tax?
Yeah, I mean, it was my first session.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the freshman, really the rookie out of the entire 99-person body. So for the first few weeks, I tried to observe as much as I could and learned as much as I could so that I was, better prepared to take on the big fights.
Uh-huh.
I had to learn how to run a bill, how to work the committee, how to navigate Cordell Hull and the floor sessions and all of the procedural minutia. So once I was able to do that, I felt pretty confident heading into the final month of the legislature, which is budget season, and I learned a lot about how our budget process takes place, the role of the governor, the role of the legislature, and then how the budget is made and then what is decided. So I think for me it was a learning experience in terms of the politics.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have been at the legislature. I've been at the legislature every year since 2017, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, particularly when it came to issues of reproductive access or anti-gun control, I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did. So I think that was kind of shocking. I think another revelation I had is that, I think a lot of people who are not in politics think the legislature is full of, which it is, pale, stale, and male. That is true. But I think on the House side, like, we have a lot of younger people, and not everyone's wealthy. I think that was a big revelation I had. Is, I think people are like, oh, people in government have a lot of money and it's full of wealthy people. It really doesn't feel that way. I think there's a lot of retirees. There's a lot of grandparents who decided to continue their life in public service and inevitably ran. And then what else did I learn? Yeah, the final week was pretty difficult. We voted on a budget that gave $1.6 billion to the biggest corporations in our state, which I'll talk about a little later on, and decided to criminalize those who are supporting people, young folks, in seeking trans care and reproductive care out of state. So, it wasn't a great session, but I learned a lot, and I'm really glad to be there.
Well, good. Well, we're glad to have you there, representing us from afar. But you came up with a bill. You co-sponsored a bill, which, I don't know, it's kind of unusual for a freshman representative. Yes? No?
Yeah, I had, so when you're in the Democratic superminority, there are two slates of bills. You have your constituent bills that are kind of technical. They may be changing a definition. They're not quite contentious. And then you have your messaging bills, which was the grocery tax, and I know we'll talk about that a little later, eliminating the grocery tax. So I was solicited by a constituent who had been on a daycare waiting list for, I want to say 2 years, and the daycare closed, and they never received a notification that the daycare facility had closed. So I decided to run a bill that would require daycare facilities who have who are aware that they could be closing, that they notify the families who are enrolled and those on the waiting list. And so I was able to pass my first bill as a newest representative in the Democratic superminority, which was a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, I didn't even know about that. Boy, that really puts a whole family in crisis when, it's bad enough when someone has a child that's sick and has to call into work. And, with some of these jobs, with big corporations, you snooze, you lose. You're out if you miss a week of work trying to find daycare. And
yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, and for a lot of families, they just show up on the, they'll show up to the facility and there's a letter on the door saying that they've closed, and then, they're having, especially working class families who are working 2 to 3 jobs, it really puts a damper in how they're providing care for their family, and accommodating, and trying to accommodate their kids.
Well, thank you for doing that. Tell us about the grocery tax. I'm just itching for you to talk about it.
Sure. So I actually need to go back and look at the history of the grocery tax, but inevitably Tennessee has a very regressive economic system.
And what does that mean?
It is comprised mostly of sales taxes.
Okay.
And when you look at the lowest income earners in the state of Tennessee, they pay a higher percentage of their income in sales tax than the wealthy. And so it's a really regressive system. And one of those taxes is the grocery tax. And so Tennessee is now one of 12 states that taxes food, which, I think a lot of different factions want to see the tax removed, in terms of, you have the anti-tax folks who, want to see a tax removed. You have the folks working, stocking your rural food banks or the food banks, and the Tennessee consumer who want to see the tax removed. And then, of course, folks like me who believe in progressive economic tax justice, to see it removed. So every year for the past, I would say, 8 to 10 years, the Democrats have put forward a bill to eliminate the tax, and they have either increased taxes on cigarettes. I need to go back and look to see what other iterations of the bill have debuted. But what we did this year is we said we're going to close corporate tax loopholes, which we do have a lot in this state, and we're going to eliminate the sales tax on groceries, both the state and local portion. So the state portion is about 7%, and then municipalities can increase that tax to 3.5%. So you're looking at 9 to 10% tax on food, which is absolutely just
especially when
unconscious.
Food prices are up anyway, and our president gets blamed for all of it, and it's not. It's partially. I think a big part of it, up to 10% tax on, a bag of chips or some graham crackers. I love graham crackers, and they were like $6. I didn't buy any graham crackers, but that's ridiculous.
Well, and the reasons are twofold. I mean, one, we've seen corporate price gouging from major grocery store chains, and that's absolutely true. And so even though prices remained the same or they were a little higher, they gouged the price so that they could make extra money. And we're seeing studies coming from COVID, kind of the lingering residual effects from COVID. But we're seeing major grocery chains give in to this corporate price gouging. I think the argument that I heard while lobbying for this bill on the right is, well, if we eliminate the tax on groceries, that cost will be passed on onto the consumer. Well, companies can respond to eliminating the grocery tax in two ways. One, they can cut their profit margin so that the CEO of Kroger made hundreds of millions of dollars last year. They can cut their profits, and they can cut their, $100,000,000 $100,000 bonuses, or they can pass that cost on the consumer, and then the consumer can decide to go elsewhere. So I know that's easier probably said than done in an urban county like Davidson, where we have a lot of grocery options. I think it's different for you in a rural community because you only have a few options, and if those prices do increase, then consumers are kind of beholden to that price ecosystem. But anyway, so I think I learned a lot through this process. I mean, one is that for your listeners, even though we don't have a state income tax, and I'm not trying to start there because I know that's that's a non-negotiable at this moment in time, but we have eroded the corporate tax base in the state so much that as I said, the lowest income earners in the state are paying the highest amount of taxes. And so a working mother trying to buy baby formula at your local grocery store is paying more in taxes than the biggest corporations in our state like FedEx and Amazon. Why is that, and how do we know that? We know that because in 2021, the Department of Revenue released a letter saying that 60% of companies are not paying our excise tax. So in Tennessee, there are two methods to pay taxes if you're a company. You can pay it via the excise tax, or you can pay it via the franchise tax. And the franchise tax is one where either a company pays the highest, they pay the tax on either their total net worth or their total property holdings. And I'm sure, Sandy, I think you were paying attention to this, but inevitably Tennessee is the one state in the country where those two things were married to each other. So once again, the franchise tax, you either paid a tax on your total net worth or your total property holdings. And so prior to the session, and now things are coming to light, but there was a law firm in Pennsylvania that basically cherry-picked states where there were questionable tax mechanisms, like our franchise tax. And so instead of pursuing litigation, the governor decided, well, we're just going to give, in order to deal with this, we're just going to give $1 billion, just play money, monopoly money, back to the biggest companies in our state, including his, which he hasn't been upfront about. So
air conditioning, heating.
Yeah, and there were studies that came to light, especially in the last few weeks, because this was the last legislative item we voted on before the legislative session adjourned. 50% of the companies that are receiving this money are out of state. And so on the floor, the Republicans tried to pitch this as a win for small businesses. It is not a win for small businesses. Small businesses are the ones that are already paying their taxes. These are companies who have the resources to evade paying taxes. And not only that, is they're getting a cash handout. And then they're taking that money out of state. It's not even being reinvested back into our communities. So I think a few takeaways. In the next few years, because we have eroded our corporate tax base, that whoever wins the Republican gubernatorial race or nomination is going to be dealing with a terrible, terrible budget. We're talking like similar cuts to when Phil Bredesen had to cut TennCare in 2005. And I think we all can directly point to who the villains are in this story. And I think for us, it's a time that we're going to need to be strong and be really clear as to who did this and why it was done and what is the antidote to that. And so I'm hoping at least, I think everything is cyclical, and I think we're seeing a turn back to at least maybe the center, because we have one of the most far-right, extreme legislatures in the country, is that we can start talking about progressive tax reform, as we flip a few more seats, including eliminating the grocery tax.
So let's see, I have a couple questions here. First of all, what's the why? I think early on, to bring in Amazon, more and more Amazon in the auto industries, the reason was jobs, and that's true. But what is the motivator now? Is it what's called corporate capture? Are these companies contributing campaign monies to the legislators that are pushing this type of pushing this movement to give more and more money to corporations so that they get campaign finances in return? Or is it just something that's just run amok over time?
I think there is a precedent for these companies bankrolling a lot of, not only the Republicans, both the Democrats and the Republicans who are backed by corporate interests.
Okay.
I'm trying to pull up a study from Adam Freeman, who's a reporter for the Tennessee Lookout, where he has a database capturing what money is going in and out of the legislature, Cash for Clout database, who's funding Tennessee politics. And you can actually go in and you can see, so the number one donor, so Tennessee's $1 Million Club of entities that are bankrolling politicians, the Tennessee Hospital Association, AT&T, HCA,
right,
Tennessee Association of Realtors. But then you can actually go in and you can see, so I'm going to pull up the Tennessee Republican Caucus. So the top 25 funders include FedEx at $500, almost $500,000 since 2009, HCA, Tennessee Bankers Association. So for me, I think it's really clear that there is a lot of corporate control in our legislature. And until we pass legislation either preventing, maybe putting caps on how much money corporations can give, or we start to see, and this is the issue I have, is say like a company like, let me give an example, like Oracle or FedEx. There are companies that have received hundreds of millions of dollars from the state to be here, right? And then, on their face, they're like, oh, we care about Black lives, like we care about DEI, we want to be an employer that cares about its people, and then they give $250,000 to the Republican caucus, who are legislating against LGBTQIA community members, who are legislating against reproductive access. So I think my issue is that the companies, they're not really being held accountable to the promises they're making, not only their staff, but also, they're coming here and they're saying one thing and doing the other.
Right. Well, I know that the Tennessee Lookout has an article about why we can't get any common sense gun legislation when over 70% of the public, the Tennessee citizens, want to see, something, red flag laws or, things like that. But that there's so much money from the gun manufacturers and the NRA. I mean, the NRA has had some, rough times, but they listen to the money, follow the money, and not the people, not the public. And I think with this too, with the corporate giveaways, that's cutting into our education funds and teacher salaries. Is that correct? Am I correct, or am I oversimplifying?
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I just think these companies are, bankrolling these politicians, and they're legislating against the wide, majority of Tennesseans and what we care about.
Yeah, and their constituents.
Go ahead.
And their constituents, the people they're representing.
Right, yeah. But I think a good example of this is HCA's Bill Frist, and so they're one of the wealthiest families, former senator, one of the wealthiest families in Tennessee, and he was recently added to the board of a gun control group, a bipartisan gun control group, but his family's PAC spent $330,000 on the Republican caucus. And so it's like, you can say you're, invested in this and doing the best you can, but like, if you are bankrolling these politicians who aren't doing anything, that's a big problem.
Yeah. And the public just doesn't seem to understand it or know, what's happening. They just know their legislator is, that's so-and-so, and they've been there. They're doing a good job. Well, this is one of the purposes of the show, and our work is to help people know and understand, what's just under that thin layer of familiarity and that. Let me go back a little bit. First of all, I'm going to give the number here to call in if there's any questions about this. This is a lot of, high caliber information we're sharing today, or you're sharing, Afton. You can call the station at 967-2201 for any comments or questions. The topic today is, taxes. We started out with the grocery tax, and then we're just talking corporate tax. I've got my T-shirt on that says "Kids, Not Corporations, Tennessee for All." It's this little souvenir from a protest that came up and talked to some people. The other thing is I hear this, and I don't have a good answer for it. We're kind of going back a little bit of what a regressive tax is. And I had one of the state senators say that there's nothing wrong with the grocery tax. It's across the board. It affects everyone, that everybody buys groceries. And if you don't have very much money, you buy ramen noodles and pay the taxes on that. And if you have a lot of money, you buy, a prime rib, and then you pay the tax on that. Why does that really not the case here?
Well, I mean, as I said, I think it'd be one thing if the only sales tax we had in the state is the grocery tax, but we have tons and tons and tons of sales taxes, and oftentimes, and once again, like, the lowest income earners pay the highest percentage of their total income on sales taxes, rather than the wealthy. But in terms of the grocery tax, like, I think it would be a great equalizer, because it does affect everyone. And I think, that type of answer, being really dismissive and just saying, well, they can eat ramen noodles, is just like, it's not preventative. We need communities that are thriving and healthy.
Yes.
And we do that to, ensure that they have access to healthy food. I think that also dismisses the role of the food banks in dealing with our food insecure neighbors and our communities across the state. In fact, I had a conversation with the CEO of the Mid-Second Harvest Food Bank, and she said, eliminating the grocery tax on food would be a huge win for them because of how much food costs. And, food cost is not going down. So this is a tax that I think, it's not something that I don't think we're going to see prices decrease when it comes to groceries anytime soon. And so I think this is one that we can definitely invest in. I hope, I have a goal. I think we can eliminate it in the next 3 to 6 years. But my goal in the legislature is to really push back against this corporate rule and to articulate a vision where we do have a progressive tax system.
And what would a progressive tax system look like?
Yeah, so in a state, well, one, it would be, inclusive of a state income tax where the wealthy and the elites pay a higher amount. In fact, I was, at a bar this week, and the bartender in Nashville said, I make $20,000 a year. I think I should pay less in taxes than someone making $1 million. It's like, yeah, I believe that too. So I think I think a wealth tax would be a progressive mechanism that we could use. And then, of course, restoring the corporate tax base. And so companies that generate and that's the other problem is, your Tennessee businesses that generate like $10 to $50 million a year, they're based in Tennessee, are paying more in taxes than Amazon and FedEx and Google. Another bill I ran, which is to hold big tech accountable by ensuring that they pay taxes, I found out that Google made over $1 billion in Tennessee, and none of that money is going back into our communities, and yet they're taking hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies to open their, Oracle world headquarters here, but what are you giving back if you're not paying taxes? So I think it's a restoration of the corporate tax base, ensuring that companies, especially multinational, international companies who generate revenue in Tennessee are paying taxes on that revenue here, and that's being reinvested back into our communities in our state.
Because it brings a lot of people and jobs for people. And then so their staffs, their employees are, buying things, sales tax, grocery tax, so we're getting that. But, their kids are going to school. They're using the roads, they're using, civil services, and they're basically getting that free because they haven't paid into those systems. And I'm mad. I think everybody should be really mad. And there are situations where people say, well, I can't do this anymore. Their medications are more complicated, or they're not dealing with mom and pop. They're dealing with a big company. In the rural areas, we buy everything from Amazon. I mean, it's just so easy to just click, and it comes to the door. And if you try to take a different route, it's difficult, and that's all because of corporations. We're not dealing with people anymore. We're dealing with systems, and we do things the way they want us to do them. So
and I've seen I've read a lot of political commentary that has said that we are worse than where revolutionary France was right before, they beheaded Marie Antoinette. We are inching towards, depending who you ask, like a techno-feudal system where these Silicon Valley, billion-dollar people who, have God complexes are, wanting to return to company towns. And we have lived that, especially in East Tennessee or in the mining area of Appalachia. It's like, we know what that was. Like, we worked really hard to ensure that didn't happen again. And then you've got these major, the richest, there are 3 families that own more wealth than the bottom 50% in this country. And so, I think looking at this data and then actually going out, especially where you live, and seeing that people's standard of living hasn't increased, people are still struggling, and not being really mad about it. I wake up and I'm mad about it every day.
Yeah, there's just kind of an acceptance, fatalistic almost.
Yeah,
When,
and I would say like it's on our end it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But one of the reasons I ran is because that at least the Democrats haven't embraced this economic populist lens in terms of pushing back against corporate rule, pushing back against the wealthiest families in Tennessee. And for me, representing the downtown economic hub, in fact, the area that generates the most revenue across the entire state, is really important for me to take these positions so that there is some leadership and there is someone who is raising awareness about this in a really big way.
Well, I had told you when we talked yesterday is that the grocery tax and all that it entails to a certain point is we've adopted that with the Franklin County Democrats. We've taken that as not as controversial as gun legislation or reproductive rights, because we're kind of easing into this. Sorry, we'll do that next year. And also because it's your bill and you're a friend of our party, to educate people in Franklin County that we do have a grocery tax and what the cost of their groceries would be if we didn't have that, if we didn't have this. That other states, don't have it. They still have food banks. The senator also said, well, even the states that don't have a grocery tax have food banks. I'm going to come back to food banks in just a second here. And then to ask them to call our representatives and just say, hey, where do you stand on this? I could be paying this much less in groceries. Also, we're not getting a holiday, I understand.
No.
Something that
was part
of the last thing passed,
legislative
right?
kind of fight that I had decided to take up is during the budget sessions. So the last week we vote on the budget, and you can file amendments. And so I filed an amendment to take $700 million from that corporate handout and reallocate it towards a 6-month grocery tax break. And only one Republican voted with the Democrats.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was a goner then. So it was 3 months previously, right?
Yes.
And
yep.
so and I'm sure the people that need it really counted on that. They probably stocked up for the
and now,
year.
And I think it's very easy. The Republicans like to point fingers at Biden, and they're Biden's the reason that we're not having a 3-month grocery tax break. And it's like, I don't think so. So I think you all drawing, especially out in these rural communities, when you're drawing a direct line to, you have this, and this is the idea with Medicare and Medicaid, like you give people access to a public program like that. They get really angry when you take it away. They get really angry when you give them a 3-month grocery tax break, and then you take it away, and you turn around and give $1 billion to the biggest companies in our state. So it's definitely something that if you are running for office, I would absolutely run on, and you have the vote counts to prove it.
Yeah. Well, Tennessee for All did do a little weekend where they asked volunteers to be outside grocery stores and hand out, information about the cost of groceries and what the tax included. And the stores came out and asked them, to leave, and wouldn't even listen to what they were doing, although it really wouldn't have affected them. In fact, Kroger's or Piggly Wiggly would have done better because people didn't have to pay the 10%, up to 10% tax. They would buy more food. But I think it was just kind of a threat. I think it's probably part of that corporative culture is you don't let people solicit or either inside the store, outside the store. They're threatened. They're threatened by anyone talking to their customers instead of trying to find what y'all doing, and that sounds good, or give me one, my family. It's just that friendliness was kind of dropped out. I think another piece of legislation this year, or I don't know that it was legislation. I think it was just something that happened that somehow we missed out on many millions of dollars because something wasn't done to buy farm goods
Oh,
for
yeah, yes,
food
yes, yes,
banks.
yes. So our food bank program, well, our Department of Agriculture, so the agency for the state, runs and works with a lot of the food banks across Tennessee. And there were a few federal grants up for grabs, and someone in the Department of Agriculture missed a deadline, and that prevented $7 million from being accessed by the food banks.
Okay. Is anybody mad about that?
Yeah. I was furious. I mean, I was really angry. I think someone at the Department of Ag probably should have lost their job over this. It's a really big deal. Fortunately, there wasn't a lot of – the budget this year was really terrible in terms of what was funded and the priorities. But one of the good things that did come out of it is they decided to repurpose $7 million from our budget and then give that back to the Department of Ag to administer to the food banks. But that's the type of, I think bureaucratic incompetence that people get really angry about. Like, you're in government, you're supposed to be helping improving our lives. Like, what are you doing if you're missing these deadlines?
Okay. Well, so that was another. That's $7 million. That's kind of small potatoes. Not to me personally, but to the whole. But what is the budget? What's the total?
$58 billion.
Okay. Well, yeah, $7 million. But still, it's the principle of the thing. And I volunteer at a food bank, and I know I always have to remind myself that it's a very small food bank. It's in Swanee. I have to remind myself that this is not supposed to be the sole source of food, because I look at our fare is tuna and pasta and spaghetti sauce, and sometimes we're lucky, we get eggs, because we're rural, we get eggs, and sometimes we get donations of meat from the big food bank in Nashville. But for somebody to really live on food bank food is pretty unhealthy. It's kind of pathetic. Sometimes we have ramen noodles. Sometimes people clean out their pantry, and then we get a whole mix of things. But I know that the money they're saving by getting their pasta and their tuna at the food bank, they're not turning around and buying fruits and vegetables, to balance that diet, out. And we have a variety of people that come in, and we try to limit it to 2 sacks of groceries. We're trying to make it available for everybody. We're just open for 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, so you kind of have to get there with 3 hours. But it's really a tough way to live, and we also have give money on a limited basis for heating bills, and people lose their rental property, and we try to put them up in a hotel, and people are living in cars and living in the RV.
Homelessness. Housing is just one of, I think, the biggest issues facing Tennessee right now. And I think the Republicans are, there are a few bipartisan bills that were passed this year to provide, because I think more importantly for your listeners, I don't know if have you talked about state preemption at all?
No.
Okay.
I don't know what that
is. So state preemption is when where the state intervenes, like local communities will pass policies that they deem the best for their communities, and then the state will intervene and say, no, you can't do that. Now, the genesis of this, I learned, is because our Constitution, the Tennessee Constitution, in the language, it says that the state gave birth to the counties. And so there's this paternalistic attitude towards the counties in terms of what they can do, what's allowed, and how the state responds to them. And so we have one of the worst states for state preemption. And this applies to both urban and rural counties. And so in Nashville, for example, Black mothers organized to place a police oversight committee on the ballot. And so, it was on a ballot. People had to vote on it in Nashville. And then the following legislative session, the state came back and neutered it to make it basically politically impotent. So in rural communities, this applies to, for example, where you are. So Hamilton County has the best public Wi-Fi, and AT&T came in and said, we don't want EPB to expand into rural communities because we want to ensure that AT&T has preeminent access to that area. So this is an issue that affects all communities across the state. And sorry, Sandy, what was I talking about that started this?
Preemption.
Housing. Yeah.
Controlling communities. Communities.
In a state like Tennessee, local communities could rally, for example, come together, and they could say, we want to do X, Y, and Z to hold rural slumlords accountable, right? So Franklin County, you all could pass legislation. The state comes in, and they've already passed legislation saying you can't do that, or they'll come in, and then they'll say you can't do that. And so it really ties the hands of our counties and our cities to identify local solutions to fix local problems. And so that's something I think I want to highlight next year in terms of my legislative portfolio, is to raise awareness about just how much state preemption affects all of us.
Well, and there's been, is this similar to overreach, government overreach?
Oh yeah, and the party of small government. I mean, it's the embodiment of big government. I mean, they don't want local control. They're overriding, locally elected ballots. And for example, another example this session was when there was someone who was killed by police in Memphis, Tyree Nichols. The city council and county commission came together and they created a set of ordinances to ensure that police or racial profiling in terms of traffic stops, and they worked really hard to create a study, and then they passed a bunch of laws. And then just this year, the two white representatives of Memphis passed legislation to override those local laws that were passed.
Well, and then, I mean, in previous years, there was kind of fiddling with the Nashville City Council, and there was some airport business, and, the legislature's trying to control Nashville.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Nashville's always the star, but I think I just want to reiterate that this is an issue for rural communities and counties as well. And so I think my goal next year is to at least pull together all of the state preemption laws currently on the books. And Cindy, you would be shocked. Some of the stuff is just so, you just sit there and you think, why is the state trying to preempt this? Well, it's because of corporate reign. And so companies have come in at the state level, and I just learned this weekend, that instead of fighting these companies came in and they said, we are going to double down on state preemption legislation because it's easier for us to just pass a statewide law prohibiting, affordable housing than going into each county and fighting it county by county.
Yeah. Well, sure. 95. That's a lot of counties. Do you want to talk a little bit about your group, Rural Organizing?
Sure. Yeah.
It's a super PAC. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, that's where I work right now. Yeah, so I have worked for a group that it's a constellation of organizations, but we passed rural federal policy. So we passed a big piece of federal legislation 2 years ago called Recompete that created block grants for distressed rural communities. And then we support progressive rural we help mobilize rural voters, progressive rural voters in key battleground states. So my job right now is we're actually running a yard sign campaign in Montana and Ohio, which are two competitive Senate states. And the goal is to, I think folks think that yard signs don't vote, but in rural communities we know that they can be really important. So We've identified via texting around 500 people in each state that want to distribute yard signs locally. And so we're sending them yard signs and asking them to organize their communities to put up yard signs.
Oh, okay. Well, I saw that on your bio, and I went to the website, and it was a lot to me to kind of figure out. I could tell that it had a national slant to it, but I did see that I could fill out a survey. So I'm going to do that later today.
Oh, great. I would love that.
See if I can, for some help, because we are certainly looking at yard signs. I'm working on our Get Out the Vote plan. We're going to put a lot of effort into getting Democrats out to vote. We want everybody to vote. We're going to do some pass out cards about early voting and last day to register, et cetera, and we'll sign up anybody. But we really want to we have over 600 contacts on our mailing list. And so see, we're out there, but trying to find something for people to be involved in. We've been doing meet and greets. We're doing a buddy system, bring along a friend, to a meet and greet, to a meeting. I try to make meetings short and fun. It's hard to make a party meeting fun. You talk about challenges, but it goes back to kindergarten. How do you make friends when you're 6? You get with somebody that you like, and you say, let's do some stuff together. And so it's like it's like breathing. So we're going to try to get that going, and we'll see what this year brings. It has been. Our newspaper, our official Franklin County Democratic online newspaper is the Tennessee Lookout, and then followed by the Tennessee Holler. But so we're trying to get people excited and involved, and not be apathetic, not give up. We're the lowest. I don't have to tell you, we have the lowest.
Do you feel like there's lots of Democrats in hiding, or there's just not not a lot of people who vote or care about politics?
All that, yeah. I think I've talked to some people that are just afraid to come out. They don't want to talk about their voting, because they're such a minority. I think they feel threatened, although I feel like people in Franklin County are really nice. You see them at the grocery store, very chatty. We're Southerners. So those folks just need to kind of deal with that. And if they want to come to a safe place and share their ideas and be with like-minded people, they don't have to do anything but to show up and give those that are, willing to go to Nashville and march around the Capitol, the plaza. We need those people as, the wind beneath our wings. Or to make a donation. They don't have to ride around in a parade covered with Biden signs or whoever. But just come along, and they might, just like kindergarten, find a friend that says, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go knock on doors, or I'm going to go to Sandy's and fill out, postcards. I'll come with you, or come along with me. Or you sound, one of our listeners this morning, Bob, has been walking his dogs, and he's not sure if he should bring up, politics, and he doesn't want to lose his dog walking friends. But I said, something will come up. There'll be an opportunity that maybe you can invite them along, and anyway, going on and on now. But I'm hopeful, and if people feel like they can make a difference on a state level, trying to refocus them from national politics. I mean that's important too, but it's such a mess, and I'm not sure that we can do that much to affect the national scene when we have so much work to be done here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the federal government is the furthest removed from us, and they, those politicians really don't care about us. So I think, starting local, being invested, and breaking the supermajority, and not just, that should be a goal for both Republicans and Democrats in the state, is pulling it back to the center. So
Right, right.
we can stomp out the extremism. I think that could be a bipartisan goal because it benefits everyone. There's just no negotiation. But particularly local elections, I mean, a lot of these races, as you know, can be decided by 50 to 100 votes.
Right, right.
And so I do think there's a vacuum, especially in states like Tennessee and red states, of groups that are investing in local and down ballot races, supporting those candidates, and then providing them, training as they try to take back some of the politics in their counties.
Well, and we really appreciate people like you, Afton. And the co-sponsor for your bill is, in the Senate, is Corinne?
Charlene Oliver.
Charlene Oliver. She's really nice, too.
Yeah.
And I think it's fun to go to Nashville and see, the Cordell Hall building and all the lobbyists that are there and all the people that are there talking to their representatives or other representatives. You have to talk to yours all the time. There's a lot of phone calls to committee members, to influence and
it's really important. I mean, obviously I'm in the super minority, and my constituents believe a lot of the things that I believe, but we were able to stop a bad bill this year that would have decimated the industries for CRNAs, nurse anesthetists, and we were able to stop that because of grassroots organizing all across the state and calling committee members. So it really does matter,
it does.
Especially in the committee process.
And by golly, we saved Obamacare.
Right.
I laid in a couple cemeteries for that, and people would dress up like, Dr. Death or whoever that ghoul is, the Grim Reaper. But that was a while back, and we're still here.
Yeah, we are. We'll continue to be here, but I'm really grateful that you put on this show and that you spend the time to educate folks who may be listening, because it is really important. I think the more you are aware, the more angry you get, and the more willing you are to stand up and be loud.
Yeah. So we're going to end on a positive note that there's something you can do. Call me. Go to Franklin County TN Democrats at gmail.com and get involved. This has been Common Sense Matters, and my excellent guest has been Representative Afton Ben from District 51. Thank you so much. Sign off.
Thank you, Sandy.
All right, be in touch, Afton. See you soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.